This is the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast with Cass Midgley.
We interview people you don't know about a subject no one wants to talk about. We hope to encourage people in the process of deconstructing their faith and help curb the loneliness that accompanies it. We think the world is a better place when more people live by sight, not by faith. Please subscribe to our podcast and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, you can support us monetarily in 2 easy ways. You can pledge
$1 million
or more through Patreon. That's patreon.com/EA podcast, or leave a lump sum donation through PayPal at our website, everyone'sagnostic.com. The smallest contribution is greatly appreciated.
Welcome, everyone, to the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast. I'm Cass Midgley. We're not going to number this week as an episode because it's not an episode. It's just an announcement. One is that the show is going to go to every other week, and so that's why this is not a real episode. We're going to do one next week, and that will be 224, I believe. So I just wanted to announce that the show is going to every other week. Secondly, we had a retreat this weekend that was amazing. Just a Friday night to Sunday morning thing. We rented a cabin in the Smoky Mountains that happened to be 4 stories tall, and it was just amazing. 26 people living together. Felt like family. It was amazing. And what I did is I asked some of the attendees, actually I asked all of them, to share their reflections on the weekend, how it touched them, how it impacted them, and I'm going to read a few of those, and that's just going to be this week's show. So without further ado, here's some excerpts from what people wrote about their experience. And I'm just going to withhold everybody's name because it's hard for me to remember who's out and who's not, and it really doesn't matter. So here's a few quotes. My biggest takeaway, upon reflection, is the complete lack of judgment and hypocrisy. In other words, I experienced complete acceptance and observed complete authenticity. I haven't been to many retreats, but I have been to a lot of other Christian events, conferences, summer camp, Bible school, youth group, revival meetings, mission trips, etc. The grand takeaway from those, even if only subconsciously, was always a sense of failure and inadequacy. I have never felt good enough for God or spiritual enough to have the Christian life you're supposed to have. But amongst you all, everything was relaxed and comfortable and good. This isn't something I talk a lot about, but as a person with an eating disorder, depression, and anxiety, I've been known to purposefully starve myself before going to things where either I will meet new people or where someone I already know might notice I've gained 10 pounds. While I'm pretty much in a healthy place with my eating issues at the moment, I couldn't help but notice that I was so relaxed that I never once felt fat or felt like I should eat less so people would like me. Thank you all for listening to me. I ramble a lot, and every single person I talked to listened. Leading up to the weekend, I didn't know what to expect. Everyone's Agnostic seems to cater to a certain personality type, which is demonstrated weekly through the show and daily on the private Facebook page. This community is made up of caring, empathetic, loving, beautiful people. Their deconstruction stories are filled with challenge and courage. I've gotten to know a few attendees better over the last year through our virtual small group, but even then, visiting with them in person makes a big difference. I lost track of how many intimate one-on-one or small group conversations I had with those who were strangers just a few hours before. Where else could something like that even happen? It happened because the Everyone's Agnostic community are not strangers. We have a common thread that binds us before we even meet. I frequently found myself on the deck, alone, looking inside the living area, moved by what will be lifelong friendships developing inside. People being real with each other, being personally guarded, is a learned behavior when living as a closeted atheist. It takes time and trust to really open up. But our Friday night check-in was so important in getting that process started. The Saturday hike was more than anyone anticipated, but the intensity of that experience further forged friendships and conversation. We played games together, had a drum circle, danced on occasion, smoked, drank, ate, laughed, cried, and bonded. Other than the check-ins, an agenda wasn't necessary. We filled in the gaps with exactly what we all came there for in the first place: community. My only regret was more people were not there to experience it. Thank you, Cass, and everyone involved in making this event possible. Looking forward to seeing each of you again soon. For many of us, our church, at one time, was everything. It was our safe place, our home, our grounding. It was family, and whether we left of our own volition or we got the boot when our beliefs could no longer match the professed creeds, we felt the sting of loss, and it hurt like hell. I've tried to reclaim a semblance of belonging at my UU church and through other group venues, but the vacuum still exists. The chasm left in the wake of my spiritual oblivion was massive. This retreat, however, offered a glimpse of hope. Over here, on the other side of faith, I realized, in a liberating way, what I didn't miss in meetings like this: accountability, prayer requests, navel-gazing, being forced to share what the Lord was showing me in His Word. You get the idea. Instead, what I experienced at this retreat was judgment-free acceptance, unleashed freedom, laughter, fun, openness, unsuppressed genuineness, and good old-fashioned atheist love. There was not a fucking thing I had to say or do to prove my spiritual worth. And bonus, I could say fuck as often as I wanted. The nostalgia of my Christian past dissipated as I got to experience something richer and even more satisfying than what I had to leave behind. This journey gets better and better, especially when we can do it together. For me, the retreat wasn't so much about finally meeting the only community that understands what it's like to deconvert. I already have a small community of people in Minnesota who can relate. Uniquely, for me, the retreat was a lot about personal challenge. Due to my deconversion, and in cooperation with my genetics, I have moderate anxiety, one such area specifically being regarding travel. It sounded utterly terrifying to fly alone somewhere I've never been, to meet people who I've never met, but who I have shared highly personal information with online. This group intrigues me, and I deeply value the work that Cass does on the podcast. He'd become a bit of a celebrity for me, so I was really excited to meet him, which leads into the oddness of meeting your celebrity. I met another celebrity of mine in September in an equally as terrifying and novel situation. Similar to that situation, it was surreal to finally match a person with their physical energy to the voice you've been hearing for years, to see how they take up space in their world, and what they're like when they're not in front of a mic. I found it actually satisfying to see Cass as fully human. We are not a cult, and Cass is not our leader. I value how much Cass doesn't try to pretend he has it all figured out, or that he is the source of transcendent wisdom for our group. And I saw his humanity in his lack of interest in dominating his cult. And while part of me senses disappointment in seeing his humanity, a more profound part feels that this is exactly what groups like ours should be. What brings us together is another human just like us, not someone who has a better connection to God than us. I legitimately don't see Cass as our leader, but rather an artist who is capable of creating the seemingly unspeakable, that which only we can relate to. And thusly he brings us together, and the product is our connection with one another. Aside from that, as I shared during the retreat, I found it highly triggering. I had been to many Christian retreats, and being in YWAM felt like a 2-year-long retreat, so I'm generally distrustful of the structure and of the high levels of emotionality that go along with it. So I found that I restrained myself from being too vulnerable, or from saying things that I didn't think were true. I'm not sure I'm comfortable telling every single one of you that I love you. But what I do love about this is that I said so. In the check-ins, I fucking said so. If I had defied the rhythm and groupthink when I was a Christian, it would put a big old target on my head. But this weekend, I put my foot down, created my boundaries, asserted where I was at, and then all you Kool-Aid drinkers respected it. That's how it was highly different than a religious retreat. When I unapologetically stuck out like a sore thumb, you all said, "You're an adorable sticky outy thumb, do your thing." And I deeply valued that. And it felt good to stand my emotional ground in a group in which I have deep desire to be liked and accepted. Still being accepted and respected after that is what makes this group very different from religious ones. The thing I repeatedly had to recalibrate my brain on at the retreat was surrounding emotional experience. I'm acutely aware of how Christian retreats/trips intentionally draw out and manipulate emotions. The quiet time reflection prompts, the Bible studies, the speakers, and probably most acutely, the music, are all contrived to elicit certain emotions. When I felt some familiar feelings, I took a step back and told myself that these emotions are real. Nobody is pulling any strings here. I took deep breaths, and I focused on being present. And instead of crediting the Holy Spirit, I told myself, this is the spirit of humanity. Beyond all that, I simply had a fantastic time at the retreat, even though all group settings give me both the desire to hide and simultaneously a persistent fear of missing out on whatever bonding experience I'm not participating in at any given moment. I felt well balanced and tried my best to live into every moment. I came away with deep connections and wonderful memories. I appreciate each of you for who you are, and am grateful to share this journey with you. And I'm sure you're all shocked, but I'd like to volunteer for the retreat planning committee next time. Now, this has nothing to do with the retreat. Maybe it does, but I stumbled onto it, and it struck me, and so I want to share a little bit about it. And I'll preface it with this. We talk about on this show how religion kind of served a purpose, not only in our lives as a micro person, but as a macro species. Religion probably served us in ways that helped perpetuate the species and our survival. It gave us meaning. It gave us purpose. Probably kept us from committing suicide or something because we felt special and we felt God had a plan. And even when our lives were falling apart or bad shit was happening, we could trust that God had a purpose and there was a reason behind everything, and everything happens for a reason and shit like that, and kept us going and such. But we're also admitting that it was a little bit of a security blanket or a pacifier and a little bit childish. And not only did we chronologically grow out of that, but scientifically and informationally and technically we figure out that some of that stuff that we thought the rainbow meant God's promise that he would never flood the earth again, we realized it was a prism and such, and germ theory and everything comes along, and religion has less. But this whole thing about childishness, it's in that context that I'm reading this quote that I'm about to read, and it resonated with me as especially true in this context of children need religion, adults don't. It's a quote from James Hollis from a book called Finding Meaning in the Second Half of Life. Quote, "The world is more magical, less predictable, more autonomous, less controllable, more varied, less simple, more infinite, less knowable, more wonderfully troubling than we could have imagined being able to tolerate when we were young." Unquote. So it struck me that here as an adult in the second half of our life, we see the world as more magical, not less. I mean, we talk about the imagination of a child and how Disney is all about magic and stuff, but that is actually like fiction. But as adults, we're looking at the world honestly, eyes wide open. And this time we're seeing real magic. Less predictable. More autonomous. Meaning the world doesn't need us. Doesn't give a damn about us. It's fine without us. Less controllable. We're out of control. This is what I love about old people. Like they give less and less fucks because they realize that they have a finite amount of fucks and they can't control shit. And this whole serenity prayer is about wisdom to know the difference. And as one ages, they start to pick their battles and that which they can't control. Anyway, the world is more varied as opposed to homogeneous, or like that it's wilder than we thought. It's less simple, and maybe we're more comfortable with it being less simple. When we were young, we kind of were intellectually lazy, and we needed to keep it simple. But the truth is, it never was simple, but now we're able to embrace it as less simple, more infinite, less knowable. We can't wrap our heads around it. We can't be the masters of it. We have to get comfortable with mystery, more wonderfully troubling than we could have imagined being able to tolerate when we were young. So one of the reasons that we compartmentalize our impending death, or the meaningless of life, or that we're a dirt clod hurling through space, or when we're done, we fade to black, that we are amoeba, we're cellular goo. We are meaningless as an anthill with busy ants is New York City. We are cockroaches with a prefrontal cortex. And we weren't able to acknowledge the harshness of that and how troubling that is to the human soul that needs to be important and have validation. You know, the way he puts it is wonderfully troubling than we could have imagined being able to tolerate when we were young. So anyway, I'm the furthest thing from mature. I have tons of arrested development, and maybe that's why these things intrigue me, is because I want that. But I do feel myself easing into that. I do feel myself becoming that. And it's good. Feels good. I pat myself on the back that I'm able to handle harsh truths. And, you know, like some of these comments we're talking about at the retreat, we're able to handle things better together. Because at the end of the day, the person next to you is just as meaningless as you. And so you can kind of look at each other and wink or smile or laugh and go, what the fuck? Here we find ourselves. And in that context, in that purview of our finitude and of the finality and of the meaninglessness of life, we're not afforded the time-wasting nonsense of nitpicking and judging that other person. They're breathing in and out. They've got a pulse. You know, we're disgusting creatures, right? Every one of us stink. We stink. We are a mess. 24 hours without a shower, and we're disgusting. And somehow I find that, like, again, like just like as we grow up and we're able to handle the meaninglessness of the world and stuff better because we're adults, I think we can handle the stink of each other. I think that we should be getting less and less judgmental. Now, I'm all about assessing my circle of friends. I'm all about saying, I don't find you interesting. I don't want to be with you. But I don't call that judgment, because I'm not judging you and condemning you. I love you and you're a great person and you have value, but go be yourself, because I don't like being around you. That's not judgment. That's me being a person of boundaries and the steward of my own happiness. And you don't make me happy. You can still be in community. I'm just not going to hang. But if I was stuck on an elevator with you for 24 hours, I could handle your stink, because I stink too. I got no place. I got no superiority. I've got no height over you to look down and find that disgusting, unless I want to find myself disgusting. And I don't. I've done that for years and it sucks. I'm not disgusting. I'm beautiful. I'm powerful. I'm good. And I want to be around people who can acknowledge that. Not because I'm good, but because I stink and I'm still good. So it's a goodness that's not based on like some kind of achievement and Western competition and individualism bootstrap bullshit. It's being human and me too. Oh, wait, I didn't mean to hashtag that, but I'm human too, so no judgment. Which is what makes me thrilled that some of the recurring comments in these reflections that the attendees wrote was how little judgment they felt. It doesn't get any better than that for me. I mean, that's the highest praise of a gathering, is that people went away, and what was some of the things that stuck with you? Oh, it was an environment of no judgment. It was acceptance. It was freedom. It was relaxed. When I was growing up in the 70s, there was a book out, I'm Okay, You're Okay. And Christians hated it. No, we're not okay. Oh, it makes me sick. Because we are okay. And you're okay and I'm okay, and fuck it. No time. Clock's ticking. We're going to the grave. Another attendee writes, I was blown away by how powerful the spirit of humanity is. I can honestly say it was a more powerful experience for me than any church retreat ever was. I wish I didn't have anything like that for comparison, that maybe it could be a standalone experience. I know one thing for sure, though. It was powerful. I have never in my life felt more free to be myself in front of a group of strangers, and then in return been greeted with that level of acceptance. It gave me a feeling of being loved that I have never experienced before in my life, and I wish I could feel like that all the time. I guess I'll settle for experiencing it at least once. I hope I never forget you all. Thank you for being who you are and for accepting me as I am. You know, the theme here that keeps coming up is acceptance. And everybody that listens to this show knows how much I emphasize being a yes-sayer to what is. And that always applies to that which we can't control. And one thing for sure that we can't control is each other, another human being. We can't control them, and when we try, it gets ugly. Here we are, presenting ourselves, naked and unashamed, unafraid. Here we are, trying to find those who will accept us just as we are. That space where it is okay to be me. That's the gold at the end of the rainbow. That's what I want, and I know it's what everybody wants. And that is true friendship. Smoky EA Weekend Reflection. PTSD. During Saturday check-in, Jeff referenced his PTSD related to deconversion and his dad's attempted suicide. I was floored when he conveyed that the PTSD associated with his deconversion actually rivaled that of the PTSD related to his dad's suicide attempt. What the actual fuck? I've been sitting in this for the last few days. Jeff, in the midst of your very real, raw, palpable pain, you gave me permission to grapple anew with the heavy burden of this crazy deconversion shitstorm. You see, my tendency is to minimize the fallout. I push and prod and charge through. I grin and bear and carry on, as if this hasn't been that big of a deal. You know, I've gone through some tough shit before, and this ain't that bad. I'm mostly holding my shit together. You know, come on, there's way worse stuff I could be working through. Actual stuff real people I know are dealing with. Suicides and attempted suicides and rapes of children and deaths of loved ones and cancers and shit. And I'm just over here trying to get a handle on the deconversion stuff. But Jeff, while you're sitting there in the midst of a few of those aforementioned shitstorms, you offered me some love. You challenged me to look back at all the shit that has transpired while on this crazy deconstruction journey. You encouraged me to acknowledge to myself that this has indeed been one fucking hard-ass road I've been traveling. You validated the depths of the sorrow, legitimized the anger, confirmed the suffering, gave permission to wallow, and spoke a truth I needed to hear. Thank you. So today I give myself permission to ache deeply. I recognize my heart has been broken into pieces. I acknowledge that my identity was stripped bare. I remind myself that it's okay to not be okay today. Graduation. A few of us were asking each other whether or not we'll graduate. Will there come a day when this deconversion shit no longer makes up the lion's share of our identity? I have friends who grew up in more liberal sects, and they express frustrations at times with my seemingly endless need to talk more of this shit through. My son, who as a young teen declared religion make-believe, has graduated. Many of my formerly progressive Christian friends have graduated. Damn, I hope I too can graduate someday. Another attendee wrote this. He says, quote, "I'd like to repeat what others have said in that I've never in my life felt more free to be myself in front of a group of strangers. I remember as a teenager going on a skiing trip, and there was a guy there for whom I had a strong attraction. The whole weekend was filled with inner turmoil as I battled what I saw back then as a demon in my psyche. On this retreat, something very similar happened, only this time I didn't hide what I was feeling. Everyone accepted me and loved me as I am, including the guy I was attracted to. And that is one of the best gifts I've ever received from anyone. Thank you." Another writes, quote, "I don't know what happened. I don't know how it happened. Something about this past weekend. Something about speaking out loud over and over again my truth. Who I am, what I care about, what I expect, what I'll put up with, and what I won't. Something about telling everyone I know, yeah, I was at an atheist retreat. So what? That's what I do now. I've been able to be home a lot since I returned, so I've had some time to sit alone and think, ease back slowly into my life. I feel so real and so raw in all the best ways. I feel so strong as a woman. I feel such self-acceptance. I know feelings go away. I'm trying to hold on to that sweet spot and learn and grow, be better. And you're all a part of my story. Thank you." You know, she says something that reminds me, it took me 2 days to come down off the high that I got from the retreat and a lot of the excitement and maybe even tension around what to do about the next one, because everybody's like, we got to do this again. So the planning part and everybody wanting more and people who didn't get to come wanting to come next time, and it's just a bit of a overwhelming feeling. And on top of just how magical the weekend was. So, in summary, there's just no words, and there's a lot of words that we've used to try to give it some explanation or some clarity. But the truth is that there's just something unexplainable, and you know what one of them said, unspeakable, about what happens when humans gather in such a accepting atmosphere. And I'm so grateful for the community that's formed around this show. As I've said before, Bob and I had no idea. We could have never foreseen the effect that it would have on people and on the relationships that they would build around it and with each other. I can't fathom it, really. But I will say this about my Christianity, is that I definitely loved Jesus because of the message of love. I loved the community. And I think what we're finding, or at least what I'm finding, is that maybe what drew me to Christianity to begin with are the very things that we've just talked about. Community and acceptance, and feeling love, feeling connected, being a part of something bigger than one's self. And so the fact that the message was God, saved the world from sin and all of that, I mean, I feel like that in hindsight, most of us just tolerated that for these other real things that were happening, because they were so intermeshed with all the doctrine. there's no way for us to know that they could exist separately from each other. That's what we're discovering now as atheists and agnostics and post-Christians and humanists. When we gather, we got everything that we loved and benefited from within Christianity and rid ourselves of the toxic. And so in many ways, it's just an amazing discovery. Maybe not to most of the world out there, but those of us who deconverted from very radical and devoted faith, we're like little children discovering something for the first time. And so I don't care if you bear with us or not, because we're bearing with each other, and that's, I think, why we find our presence and our coexistence so valuable, is that very few people get it. And that's okay. I'm glad they don't get it, because that means they didn't have to go through what we went through. But here we find ourselves. And okay, like I said, there's no guest this week. I just wanted to make an announcement that this show is now officially going from 1 episode per week to 1 episode every 2 weeks. And you know what I found also? Because of my metrics and, the number of people downloading shows per week and stuff, is that people are almost always catching up. Some of you listen and keep up week after week, but the majority of the listeners miss a few weeks and then try to catch up. And so I'm overproducing in some ways. But more than anything, I am stressed out and spread too thin. And it's for my own sake. I could sit here and say, well, it's for my family's sake and look like a noble motherfucker, but I'm not that guy. I'm really not a very good dad or husband. So I'm not going to pose as one and say, I'm really doing this for my family. Nope, it's for me. I'm feeling the need to not. And that's the only explanation I need. I don't even need that. No, I mean, you don't even need that. I don't care. But I want to give you that because you're my friends. And true friends don't expect it, or don't carry some kind of entitlement that I owe you an explanation as to why I went to 2 weeks. Even if you're a Patreon donor, that's your prerogative. I completely understand it if you cut your donation in half because now you're getting half the product. I get it. That's fair. I would have loved to have lived off the podcast, but that's not going to happen. After 4.5 years, it hadn't happened yet. It's not going to happen. I don't have any sponsors. Don't know how to get them. Don't know how to promote myself. I'm not a very good capitalist. I'm really not a very good quote-unquote American. And don't give a fuck. So I highly encourage you to go out to YouTube and watch the video. It's on, I think it's just YouTube, Cass Midgley. I don't know how you find it. Everyone's agnostic. And it's the most recent video. It's just 2.5 minutes that one of the attendees filmed and put together really quickly. Okay, that's the show for this week. I will put out an episode next week, the one I promised last week, which is a talk with Ryan Bell. But after that, they're going to start coming every 2 weeks. And that's just, the way it is. It's what I've got to do with my life right now. So, love you guys. Have a good week. Say yes to what is. We'll talk to you later.